The Elysians cried out in helpless horror, telepathically wailing as their cities were burned and their bodies were butchered for Crocs meals, while uncaring alien neighbors simply watched, then fled, not wanting to be next on the menu. The peaceful Elysians, humanoids who had just discovered interstellar travel, were thrilled to finally meet alien life. But that first contact became a nightmare when the massive, unidentified alien ships entered their star system and began orbiting their blue and green world. The ships, belonging to the brutal insectoid Crocs, launched a devastating orbital bombardment on the Elysian capital city, Ethoria. Buildings toppled, fires raged, and millions died in an instant. The few surviving Elysians soon realized that the Crocs hadn't come to negotiate or subjugate, they had come to feast. Among the panicked survivors was a young male named Raxa. He watched the Crocs' troops land and begin their systematic extermination of his people. Their blood-curdling clicks and chitters echoed through the ruined streets as they hunted down every last Elysian, dragging them back to their ships to be consumed. Raxor barely escaped with his life, fleeing into the mountains. There he discovered a hidden military base and a long-range communication device. With shaking hands, he sent a desperate plea for help to anyone who might be listening. Raxa's transmission reached a human exploration vessel, the TSS Prometheus. The ship's commander, Captain Gabriel Roberts, immediately recognized the severity of the situation. He knew that if humanity didn't intervene, an entire sentient species would be devoured. The Elysians would be just another footnote in the Crocs' long history of slaughter. But Roberts also knew the risks. His superiors had strictly forbidden him from getting involved in such conflicts. Humanity was already locked in a bitter war with another alien race, and they couldn't afford to open up a second front. If Roberts disobeyed orders to save the Elysians, he and his crew would be branded as traitors. They would be hunted down and executed by their own kind. But if they did nothing, the Elysians' screams would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The choice was clear. The captain turned to his bridge crew, his eyes burning with determination. "Plot a course for Elysia," he ordered. "We're going in." As the Prometheus sped through the void towards Elysia, the bridge was tense with anticipation. Captain Roberts paced back and forth, his mind racing with the implications of what they were about to do. Suddenly, the comm officer's voice cut through the silence. "Captain, we're picking up a distress signal from a nearby vessel. It's the GCS Harmony, a Galactic Council peacekeeping ship." Roberts rushed over to the comm station, his heart pounding. "Put it through," he ordered. The distress call filled the bridge, the panicked voice of the Harmony's captain barely audible over the sound of explosions and alarms. "This is the GCS Harmony. We're under attack by a Crocs warship. They ambushed us as we were responding to the Elysians' plea for help. We can't hold them off much longer. Please, if anyone can hear this, send help immediately." The signal cut off abruptly, replaced by the hiss of static. Roberts felt a chill run down his spine. He turned to his crew, his face grim. "Scan for the Harmony's location," he said. "We have to see if there are any survivors." But as the Prometheus approached the coordinates, it became clear that there was nothing left of the Harmony. The Crocs had completely destroyed the ship, leaving only a field of debris and lifeless bodies floating in the void. Roberts felt a wave of despair wash over him. The Crocs' brutality was beyond anything he had ever encountered. He knew that if they didn't act fast, the Elysians would suffer the same fate. He opened a secure channel to Terran Command, his voice urgent. "Admiral, the situation on Elysia is even worse than we feared. The Crocs have already destroyed a Galactic Council ship that was responding to the Elysians' distress call. We need to send reinforcements immediately." There was a long pause before the Admiral responded. "Captain Roberts, I'm afraid I have some bad news. The Terran government has decided not to intervene in the Elysian conflict. They fear retaliation from the Crocs and believe that the Elysians are not strategically important enough to risk a war over." Roberts felt a surge of anger and frustration. "But, sir, we can't just abandon them. They're a sentient species and they're being slaughtered. We have a moral obligation to help." The Admiral's voice was sympathetic but firm. "I'm sorry, Captain, but the decision has been made. You are to continue your mission and avoid any contact with the Crocs or the Elysians. That's an order." Roberts slammed his fist down on the console, his mind racing. He knew that he couldn't just sit back and watch as an entire species was wiped out. He turned to his crew, his eyes blazing with determination. "I know this goes against our orders, but I can't stand by and do nothing. I'm asking each of you to join me in a covert mission to help the Elysians. It won't be easy, and it could cost us everything. But I believe it's the right thing to do. Who's with me?" There was a moment of silence as the crew looked at each other, weighing the gravity of what their captain was proposing. Then, one by one, they nodded their agreement. They were a diverse group from all corners of Earth, but they were united in their belief in justice and their loyalty to their captain. As the Prometheus entered Elysia's atmosphere, under the cover of darkness, Roberts and his team prepared to land near the hidden Elysian military base, where Raxor had taken shelter. They knew that they were risking everything by defying their orders, but they also knew that they couldn't live with themselves if they did nothing. But unbeknownst to the humans, their arrival had not gone unnoticed. A Croc scout ship had detected their presence and was now tracking their every move, relaying their location back to the main Croc's fleet. As Roberts and his team disembarked from the Prometheus, they had no idea that they were walking into a trap, one that would force them to confront the brutal reality of the Crocs' hunger and the lengths they would go to satisfy it. The Prometheus touched down in a clearing near the hidden Elysian base, its engines whining as they powered down. Captain Roberts and his team disembarked, their weapons at the ready, scanning the surrounding forest for any signs of Croc's activity. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke and the distant sounds of screams and explosions. As they approached the base entrance, a small group of Elysian survivors emerged from the shadows, their eyes wide with fear and suspicion. Among them was Raxor, his face gaunt and his clothes tattered. He stepped forward, his telepathic voice echoing in the humans' minds. "Who are you? Why have you come here? Why?" Captain Roberts holstered his weapon and raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "I am Captain Gabriel Roberts of the TSS Prometheus. We intercepted your distress call and have come to help you fight against the Crocs." Raxor's eyes narrowed as he probed the human's mind, searching for any hint of deception. To his surprise, he found only sincerity and a genuine desire to help. He nodded slowly, his telepathic voice tinged with gratitude. "Thank you, Captain. We are in dire need of assistance. The Crocs have already destroyed most of our cities and killed countless numbers of our people." As Raxor led the humans into the base, he shared with them everything he knew about the Crocs' tactics and weaknesses. Roberts listened intently, his mind racing as he began to formulate a plan of attack. Suddenly, the base's alarms began to blare and the sound of Croc screeches filled the air. A scout ship had landed nearby, and a group of heavily armed Crocs warriors were making their way towards the base, their insectoid eyes glinting with hunger and malice. Roberts barked orders to his team, directing them to set up a defensive perimeter around the base. They worked quickly, using their advanced weaponry and tactical expertise to create a formidable barrier between the Crocs and the Elysian survivors. As the Crocs closed in, the air grew thick with tension. Roberts and his team crouched behind their makeshift barricades, their fingers hovering over their triggers, ready to fire at a moment's notice. Suddenly, a massive Crocs warrior burst through the perimeter, its mandibles clicking furiously as it charged towards Raxor. The Elysian leader tried to defend himself, but the Crocs was too fast. It slashed at Raxor with its razor-sharp claws, sending him flying across the room, his body crumpling to the ground in a pool of his own blood. Roberts leapt into action, his reflexes honed by years of training. He lunged at the Crocs warrior, engaging it in a brutal hand-to-hand combat. The creature was strong and fast, but Roberts was determined. He dodged and weaved, landing blow after blow until finally, with a sickening crunch, he snapped the Croc's neck. As the creature's lifeless body slumped to the ground, Roberts rushed to Raxor's side. The Elysian leader was barely conscious, his breathing shallow and labored. Roberts quickly applied pressure to the wound, using his limited medical knowledge to try and stop the bleeding. Around him, the rest of the human team worked frantically to fortify their defenses, knowing that the Crocs would soon launch a full-scale assault. They welded shut doors, reinforced walls with scavenged metal, and set up choke points to funnel the Crocs into kill zones. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and the hum of energy weapons charging. Roberts looked down at Raxa's unconscious form, his heart heavy with the weight of the task before them. He knew that they were outnumbered and outgunned, but he also knew that they couldn't give up. The fate of an entire species rested on their shoulders, and they would fight to the last breath to defend. The Croc's assault came like a tidal wave, a relentless surge of chitinous bodies and plasma fire. The insectoid warriors poured into the base, their exoskeletons gleaming in the dim light, their weapons spitting deadly bolts of energy. Roberts and his team met them head-on, their own weapons blazing, their faces set with grim determination. The battle was fierce and brutal, a desperate struggle for survival against overwhelming odds. The Crocs were tough, their thick armor deflecting many of the humans' shots, but Roberts and his team fought with skill and tenacity, working together like a well-oiled machine. Raxa, still weak from his wounds, but driven by a fierce desire to protect his people, joined the fray, his telepathic powers reaching out to sow confusion and disarray among the Croc's ranks. The insectoid warriors faltered, their coordination suddenly disrupted, and the humans pressed their advantage. Lieutenant Sarah Hawkins, her face streaked with sweat and grime, worked feverishly at the base's defense systems, her fingers flying over the controls as she sought to modify the weapons to exploit the Crocs' weaknesses. It was a race against time, and every second counted. Suddenly the tide of battle began to turn. The modified defense systems came online, their beams slicing through the Crocs' exoskeletons like a hot knife through butter. The insectoid warriors fell, one by one, their bodies littering the ground. But even as the humans began to hope for victory, a new threat appeared on the horizon. A massive Crocs battleship, its hull bristling with weapons, descended from the sky, its energy cannons aimed directly at the Elysian base. Roberts felt his blood run cold. They had no chance against a ship of that size and power, not with their current resources. But then, an idea began to form in his mind, a desperate gambit that just might work. He gathered his team around him, his voice urgent. "Listen up, everyone. We can't take out that battleship with what we have, but there might be another way. The Prometheus is equipped with an experimental warp drive. If we can get close enough, we might be able to create a temporary singularity that would disable the ship's weapons." The others looked at him, their faces a mix of hope and fear. They knew the risks involved, knew that it would be a one-way trip for whoever piloted the shuttle. Sergeant Mark Johnson, Robert's closest friend and the best pilot on the team, stepped forward, his jaw set with determination. "I'll do it, Captain. I'll take the shuttle and deploy the warp drive." Roberts looked at him, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what he was asking. But there was no other choice. He nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "Godspeed, Mark, and thank you." Johnson clasped his hand, his eyes meeting Roberts in a moment of silent understanding. Then he turned and strode towards the shuttle bay, his steps unwavering, his mind focused on the task ahead. Roberts watched him go, a sense of dread settling in his gut. He knew that this was their only chance, but the price they might have to pay was almost too much to bear. He turned back to the battle, his weapon raised, his mind already racing ahead to the next move, the next desperate gamble in a war that had already cost them so much. As Sergeant Johnson's shuttle hurtled towards the looming Crocs battleship, the battle on the ground raged on with unrelenting ferocity. Captain Roberts and his team fought tooth and nail, their weapons blazing as they cut down one Crocs warrior after another. The air was thick with the stench of smoke and charred flesh, the sound of plasma fire and agonized screeches echoing through the ruins of the Elysian base. Raxa, his wounds still fresh but his spirit unbroken, stood alongside the humans, his telepathic powers reaching out to the Crocs, sowing confusion and discord in their ranks. As he fought, he sensed Johnson's presence, a beacon of courage and determination amidst the chaos of battle. In that moment their minds touched, and Raxa was flooded with a vision of a future where humans and Elysians stood united against the darkness, a future where the Crocs and their ilk were nothing more than a distant memory. He poured that vision into Johnson's mind, filling him with the strength and clarity he needed to see his mission through to the end. Johnson gritted his teeth, his hands steady on the shuttle's controls as he rocketed towards the battleship. The massive vessel filled his view screen, its hull bristling with weapons, its very presence a testament to the Crocs' hunger for destruction. But Johnson would not be deterred. He knew that the fate of the Elysians, and perhaps the entire galaxy, rested on his shoulders. As the battleship's weapons locked onto his shuttle, he closed his eyes, his finger hovering over the warp drive's activation switch. In that moment he saw the faces of his crewmates, his friends, his brothers and sisters in arms. He saw the face of Captain Roberts, a man he would follow to the ends of the universe and beyond. With a final defiant cry, Johnson slammed his hand down on the switch, and the warp drive roared to life. A massive singularity erupted from the shuttle, a swirling vortex of energy that engulfed the battleship like a hungry beast. The vessel shuddered and buckled, its hull tearing apart like tissue paper as the singularity consumed it from within. On the ground, Roberts and his team watched in awe as the battleship exploded, raining debris down upon the planet's surface. The remaining Crocs warriors, their resolve shattered by the sight of their mightiest vessel reduced to scraps, turned and fled, their screeches of terror echoing through the ruins. For a moment there was silence, a stillness that seemed to stretch on for an eternity. Then a cheer erupted from the humans and Elysians alike, a cry of victory and defiance that shook the very foundations of the base. They had done it. Against all odds, they had struck a blow against the Crocs that would be felt across the galaxy. But even as they celebrated, a sense of sorrow began to creep in, a realization of the price they had paid for their victory. Roberts and his team searched the wreckage of the battleship, hoping against hope that they might find some sign of Johnson, some hint that he had somehow survived the singularity's fury. But there was nothing. No trace of the brave sergeant who had given his life to save them all. Raxor reached out with his telepathic senses, searching for any flicker of Johnson's presence, but he found only emptiness, a void where a vibrant soul had once burned bright. The team gathered around the wreckage, their heads bowed in grief and respect. Roberts stepped forward, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Sergeant Mark Johnson was a hero," he said, his voice steady despite the pain in his heart. "He gave his life so that we might live, so that the Elysians might have a chance at freedom. We will honor his sacrifice by fighting on, by making sure that his death was not in vain." The others nodded, their faces grim with sorrow and determination. They knew that Johnson would not be the last to fall in this war, that there would be more battles to come, more sacrifices to be made, but they also knew that they would face those challenges together, humans and Elysians united in a common cause. As the smoke began to clear and the sun peeked through the clouds, a new chapter was beginning for the people of Elysia. The Terran government, finally realizing the true scope of the Crocs' threat, had pledged to send reinforcements and aid to the beleaguered planet. Raxa, his leadership forged in the crucible of battle, had emerged as a beacon of hope for his people, a symbol of the strength and resilience that had carried them through their darkest hour. And so, as the Terran ships descended from the sky like angels of deliverance, Captain Roberts and Raxa stood side by side, watching as a new future unfolded before them. They knew that the road ahead would be long and hard, that the Crocs would not rest until every last Elysian had been devoured. But they also knew that they would face those challenges together, bound by the unbreakable bond that had been forged in the heat of battle. The war was far from over, but for now there was hope, a glimmer of light in the darkness that had for so long threatened to consume them all, and as the humans and Elysians began the long, slow process of rebuilding, they did so with heavy hearts, mourning those who had fallen, but also with a fierce determination to honor their sacrifice, to build a better future for all the peoples of the galaxy. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.